In 2023, Marx, yes, Karl Marx, became a TikTok sensation with over 2 billion views, 68% from users under 25. Harvard's Institute of Politics reports interest in Marxist theory among 18 to 24-year-olds surged 43% since 2019, outpacing all other economic frameworks. This isn't mere rebellion. If young people simply wanted to provoke, why not Nietzsche, Foucault, Rand? The contrarian youth explanation collapses under scrutiny. So what's drawing Generation Z to a bearded 19th century economic philosopher? The answer reveals something profound about both today's economic landscape and the enduring power of Marx's analysis. Forget the tired stereotypes of coffee shop revolutionaries or naive idealists. The documented engagement of Gen Z with Marx crosses educational backgrounds, geographic regions, and even political affiliations. According to Pew Research data, interest in Marxist analysis spans urban and rural communities, varies minimally by gender, and appears across the income spectrum. What explains this phenomenon? Our analysis reveals 3 distinct factors driving this unexpected engagement. First, the economic realities confronting Gen Z bear striking similarities to conditions Marx originally analysed. Precarity, inequality, and labour alienation experienced not as theory but as lived reality. Second, digital platforms have democratized access to complex theory, bypassing traditional gatekeepers and enabling peer-to-peer exploration of ideas. Third, young adults are adapting Marx's frameworks in surprisingly practical ways, from analysing creative economies to understanding digital exploitation to managing mental health, often entirely separate from political advocacy. The financial landscape confronting Generation Z bears striking structural similarities to the conditions Marx analysed in industrial Europe. Despite the obvious differences in technology and living standards, this parallel isn't merely theoretical, it's backed by hard economic data. According to the Federal Reserve's 2023 distributional financial accounts, millennials control just 4.6% of US wealth despite being the largest adult generation in history. Projections for Gen Z are even more troubling, with models suggesting they'll control less than 3% of wealth by the time their oldest members reach 35. Meanwhile, the wealthiest 1% now own 38.2% of the country's assets, the highest concentration since the 1920s. This mirrors the capital concentration Marx identified as inherent to the system, not as a bug, but as a feature. Marx's concept of alienation, the profound disconnection workers feel from their labour and its products, finds powerful new relevance in today's gig economy. With 40% of Gen Z reporting participation in platform-mediated work according to McKinsey's Global Institute, the experience of being reduced to an interchangeable algorithm-managed resource is widespread. As one 23-year-old delivery driver explained in a Wired interview, Marx's analysis of labour as a commodity feels incredibly relevant when you're juggling 3 gigs and still can't afford rent. I'm literally selling fragments of my time while an app extracts value from each transaction. The 2023 Deloitte Global Gen Z survey reveals the material consequences of this economic structure. 46% of respondents report living paycheck to paycheck, with median savings below 2 weeks of basic expenses. More tellingly, 72% cite economic inequality as their top societal concern, precisely the conditions Marx identified as driving class consciousness. This isn't abstract philosophy, it's economic reality quantified in polling data. Unlike previous generations, Gen Z came of age during extraordinary economic instability. The aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, 2 significant recessions, a global pandemic, and now persistent inflation amid stagnant wages. This formative context matters. The Pew Research Center found that 70% of those born after 1996 believe the economic system unfairly favors powerful interests, a percentage that has risen steadily since they began tracking this cohort. This lived experience creates fertile ground for Marx's analytical framework. As economics professor Isabella Rodriguez noted in her widely shared lecture series, Marx's critique of capital accumulation provides an explanatory framework for many Gen Z experiences, not as abstract theory, but as lived reality. His analysis of how capital necessarily concentrates in fewer hands over time matches exactly what they've witnessed throughout their lives. This practical utility extends beyond casual interest. A 2022 Georgetown University study found that students choosing economics as a major increasingly cited understanding systemic inequality as their primary motivation, up 37% from a decade earlier. The study's lead researcher noted that students aren't necessarily embracing Marx's political prescriptions, but rather finding his diagnostic framework uniquely useful for understanding the economic conditions they're navigating. The data paints a clear picture. Marx's analytical framework resonates with Gen Z, not because of ideological fashion, but because it provides explanatory power for concrete economic realities that define their lives. Unlike previous generations, Gen Z's encounter with Marx often happens entirely outside traditional institutional contexts. This represents a fundamental shift in how complex theoretical ideas circulate, one with profound implications for how we understand intellectual engagement in the digital age. Analytics firm Data Reportal documented that explainer content on complex economic theories has seen a 189% increase in engagement since 2020, with Marx consistently ranking in the top 5 most discussed theorists across platforms. Their 2023 Digital Theory Monitor found that content tagged with terms like surplus value, alienation, and labour theory generated over 4.7 billion impressions, predominantly among users 18 to 24. This isn't casual scrolling. Their engagement metrics show average view times exceeding 7 minutes for this content. As digital media researcher Dr. Samira Patel notes in her widely cited study on algorithm-driven learning, the recommendation systems on platforms like YouTube and TikTok have inadvertently created pathways to content that was previously confined to university settings. A user watching content about work frustration might be recommended an explainer on Marx's theory of alienation, creating an entirely new access point to complex theory. These algorithmic pathways represent a democratization of access fundamentally different from how previous generations encountered theoretical frameworks. The Stanford Internet Observatory documented this phenomenon quantitatively, identifying over 17,000 unique creator accounts, producing content specifically explaining Marxist concepts in accessible language, with the majority emerging since 2020. Their content analysis revealed something surprising. 73% of these creators had no formal academic background in economics or philosophy, yet their explanations often achieved higher clarity ratings in comprehension testing than traditional academic sources. These digital pathways facilitate something unprecedented: direct engagement with primary texts without institutional mediation. Unlike previous generations who encountered prepackaged interpretations of Marx, digital platforms enable direct exploration. Ebook distributor data confirms this trend. Downloads of The Communist Manifesto and Das Kapital increased by 231% among users 18 to 24 between 2019 and 2023. More significantly, completion metrics show these aren't merely performative downloads. Average completion rates exceed 68% for the Manifesto and 42% for the more challenging Das Kapital. This direct engagement has spawned a remarkable phenomenon: voluntary reading groups forming outside academic structures. Digital education platforms report over 12,000 active reading groups focused on economic theory, with Marx-focused groups growing at triple the rate of any other theoretical focus. As digital learning researcher Dr. Michael Chen observed, "We're seeing something unprecedented. Thousands of young people voluntarily forming reading groups to tackle difficult theoretical texts that aren't assigned by any institution. These aren't credit-seeking students. They're intellectually curious individuals creating their own learning communities." The Oxford Internet Institute quantified this phenomenon in their 2023 Digital Discourse project, finding that discussion forums dedicated to economic theory have grown 78% since 2020, with participants predominantly under 25. Their discourse analysis revealed something particularly significant. These spaces focus on applying theoretical frameworks to contemporary issues rather than political advocacy. The most active threads across these forums deal with applying Marxist analysis to concrete situations, gig work conditions, platform economics, creative labour, with explicitly political discussions representing less than 18% of total engagement. This digital context fundamentally changes the nature of engagement. Without traditional gatekeepers, Gen Z encounters Marx not as a political totem or academic requirement, but as an analytical tool discovered through organic digital exploration. A tool they're applying to their lived experiences in ways previous generations could never have anticipated. Perhaps most surprising is how Gen Z is adapting Marx's analytical frameworks far beyond traditional political contexts. This isn't mere resurrection, but creative application to contemporary challenges Marx himself never anticipated. The Creative Economies survey by Adobe found that 31% of Gen Z content creators explicitly reference Marxist concepts when analysing creative labour and digital economics, regardless of their personal politics. As one tech entrepreneur explained, "I'm not politically aligned with Marx at all, but his analysis of how value is extracted from labour is crucial for understanding exploitative practices in the tech industry. His diagnostic framework is useful regardless of your politics." Gaming platforms report a 156% increase in community discussions applying Marxist analysis to in-game economies since 2021. These discussions cross political lines, analysing everything from resource extraction in Minecraft to labour dynamics in simulation games. Game designers note this represents economic theory through the back door of entertainment, analytical tools being applied where young people actually spend their time. Environmental activism shows similar adaptation. Yale's climate communication study found 42% of Gen Z environmental activists explicitly reference Marx's concept of metabolic rift, his theory of ecological crisis under capitalism, regardless of their position on other aspects of his work. This framework helps connect individual consumer choices to systemic environmental challenges in ways resonating with climate-conscious young adults. The American Psychological Association documented a 67% increase in mental health discussions, incorporating concepts of alienation and commodification since 2020. Young people increasingly frame mental health challenges as connected to economic structures rather than purely individual failings. As one viral post explained, "Marx's framework helped me understand that my burnout wasn't just personal weakness but connected to material conditions affecting my entire generation." The Journal of Digital Humanities found a 112% increase in content applying Marxist analysis to digital relationships, data extraction, and platform economics. These analyses examine how social media extracts value from user content, how dating apps can modify relationships, and how attention itself has become a monetized resource. What makes these applications notable is their cross-political utility. As one researcher concluded, these applications aren't primarily ideological. They're analytical tools addressing contemporary problems. Young people across the political spectrum find utility in Marx's analytical method, while often explicitly rejecting his political conclusions. It's the diagnostic power they value, not the prescription. The documented engagement of Generation Z with Marx represents something far more nuanced than political trend hopping or youthful radicalism. The evidence reveals a generation grappling with complex systemic challenges who have discovered analytical frameworks that provide explanatory power for their lived experiences. What distinguishes this phenomenon is its cross-ideological nature. As sociologist Dr. James Rivera observed after studying these trends, what's particularly notable is the diverse application of these concepts across political lines. Young people who wouldn't dream of identifying as Marxists are nonetheless finding utility in his analytical frameworks while explicitly separating method from ideology. This separation of analytical utility from political prescription explains why Oxford University Press reported a 186% increase in Marx-related academic publications aimed at non-specialist audiences since 2020. Their publishing data reveals a striking pattern. Books applying Marxist analysis to contemporary issues consistently outsell traditional political interpretations by margins exceeding 3-1. What we're witnessing isn't the resurrection of 19th century politics, but the adaptation of theoretical tools to 21st century challenges. Gen Z has effectively unbundled Marx's diagnostic frameworks from his political prescriptions, applying his analysis of alienation, commodification, and systemic contradiction to domains he could never have imagined, from digital economies to environmental systems to psychological well-being. Perhaps most significantly, this trend suggests something fundamental about theory itself. that powerful analytical frameworks transcend their historical context, finding new relevance when material conditions create resonance with their core insights. In this light, Gen Z's engagement with Marx represents not an ideological turn but an intellectual pragmatism, the discovery that sometimes old tools offer the most clarity for understanding new problems.